welcome to the deep dive. Okay, today we're tackling something that's, well, it's absolutely everywhere. Generative AI. You're
Mhm.
seeing it pop up, whipping up text, creating images, writing code, even analyzing business data.
It's pretty amazing stuff.
It really is. And for you, our listeners, the curious minds wanting to get the real scoop, you know, without the endless jargon, we're not just going to be wowed by the capabilities
Okay,
today.
and no, definitely not.
We're digging into a really crucial, maybe often overlooked side of this technology.
Exactly. Our focus today is really on the costs. The surprisingly significant costs that come with actually using these incredibly powerful generative AI models.
Right.
We've got some excellent material here that really brings this into focus, looking at the big names like OpenAI's GPT, Google's Gemini, Anthropic's Claude.
Precisely, because while all the buzz, all the excitement is about what these AI tools can do, there's this very real financial aspect that, well, it often gets lost in the shuffle.
It really does.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why? Why has generative AI become so pervasive so quickly? What's driving its adoption, across so many different apps and businesses?
Well, the appeal's just huge, isn't it? Businesses are constantly looking for an edge, some kind of advantage.
Sure.
And generative AI offers these seemingly instant ways to add really sophisticated features.
Yeah.
Think about automating customer support,
Yeah.
but with chatbots that can actually understand complex questions, not just keyword matching.
Right. A big step up.
Or generating compelling marketing content, like at scale,
Yeah.
making search functions way more intuitive, or even sifting through massive data sets to find those, valuable business insights. It promises a real jump in productivity, better functionality. It's very attractive.
It's like plugging in a super intelligent assistant almost to handle all sorts of tasks.
Pretty much, yeah.
But as our sources highlight, this power comes with a tangible cost. And here's where it gets really interesting. How do we actually get access to these advanced AI models? It's not like you just download an app onto your phone, right?
That's right. Yeah, for the most part, these cutting-edge models, the really powerful ones, they aren't typically available as like open source software you can just freely download and run yourself.
Okay.
Instead, the big companies, OpenAI, Google, AWS, others, they provide access through cloud-based application programming interfaces, APIs.
APIs, right.
Think of it like having a universal remote that lets you access these powerful tools hosted on their servers.
Okay, like a connection.
Exactly.
Hmm.
But each time you use that remote, each time you make a request, there's a small fee attached.
Okay, so it's more like a rental or
Hmm.
maybe a utility service, kind of.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like electricity or water, you pay for what you use.
How does the billing actually work then? Because that's where these seemingly small costs could really start to snowball, couldn't they?
Absolutely. They definitely can. There are a few common ways they structure the pricing. One very common method is per token.
Per token, what's a token?
Good question. So these models process language by breaking it down into smaller units called tokens. Think of them roughly as words or maybe parts of words.
Okay.
You get charged based on the total number of tokens the model processes. That includes both the input, what you send to the AI, and the output, what it sends back to you.
Ah, so input and output both count.
Yes. Another model is per call. So each distinct interaction, each time you ping the API, you incur a cost.
Right.
And then some providers also offer subscription-based plans, often with different tiers depending on how much you think you'll use it or maybe specific features you need access to.
Can you give us some real-world examples? Make this a bit more concrete.
Sure. For example, OpenAI's GPT-4 API. It charges a specific rate for every 1,000 tokens it processes, input and output.
Okay, 1,000 tokens.
And their more advanced model, GPT-4 Turbo, actually has different rates depending on the size of the context window it can handle.
A context window.
Yeah, basically how much information it can sort of remember and consider doing one single interaction. Bigger window, potentially different cost.
I see.
And similar for others. Google's Gemini Pro, Anthropic's Claude, they have comparable per-use pricing structures. Our material also points out there can be other costs too, like extra costs for fine-tuning the models.
Fine-tuning.
Yeah, like training them to be really good at one very specific task for your business. That costs extra. Or paying for higher levels of reliability and support, what they call service level agreements, or SLAs.
Ah, SLAs.
Right.
For uptime guarantees and stuff.
Exactly. You often pay a premium for that kind of assurance. Higher availability, faster support if something goes wrong.
So hang on. Every single question a chatbot answers, Every image created by an AI tool, every little snippet of code suggested, it's all being like metered.
Essentially, yes.
Uh,
Metered and billed.
And if you have a lot of users or your applications are just really active, those tiny, tiny per-use charges could quickly add up to, well, a significant expense.
Precisely. I mean, imagine a popular app. Hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of users,
Yeah.
all interacting with some generative AI feature multiple times a day. That monthly bill for just the API usage, it could become surprisingly large, maybe even alarmingly large.
It really makes you wonder why this isn't always front and center when companies are rushing to integrate AI.
Hmm.
What are the typical things they do focus on that might cause them to sort of overlook these ongoing costs?
Well, often the initial focus when you're evaluating these AI solutions, it's on the immediate, the impressive stuff,
And
right?
how well it performs.
Exactly. The model's performance. How accurate is it? How fast is the response time, the latency? How creative can it be? Does it feel intelligent? Then there's the perceived ease of integration, which,
Yeah.
The API first approach definitely helps with. It seems easy to just plug it in.
Plug and play, almost.
Kind of. And naturally, everyone's looking for that competitive edge, that boost that AI promises to deliver. Get ahead of the competition.
So it's all about the shiny new capabilities and maybe the quick wins. But what's the crucial piece that tends to get forgotten in that excitement?
Yeah, what often gets overlooked, or maybe just underestimated, is a really thorough consideration of those recurring API usage costs, especially when you're calculating the total cost of ownership, the TCO, for the AI solution.
TCO, right.
And in their long-term financial projections, too. It's just easy to get swept up in the potential benefits, the wow factor, and kind of forget about the continuous expense of actually using the technology, especially when you scale up.
And what kind of trouble can this oversight lead to? What are the negative consequences?
Well, our sources highlight several key risks here. The most immediate one is simply under-budgeting.
Not having enough money set aside.
Right. Under-budgeting for the actual operational costs of running and scaling these AI-powered features. This can lead to business models that look great on paper initially, but then become unsustainable as their user base grows, and boom, the API consumption just skyrockets.
So growth becomes a problem.
Ironically, yes. And in the longer term, it can create what's known as technical debt.
Technical debt, okay.
Companies might find themselves, down the road, needing to fundamentally re-engineer their applications, maybe rip out the API calls or replace them, just to reduce their dependence on these costly third-party APIs.
And that sounds expensive.
Oh yeah, that kind of major rework can be very expensive and really time-consuming. A big headache.
These sound like very real, potentially quite damaging outcomes. Can we look at some concrete examples just to really illustrate the impact of these hidden costs?
Absolutely. Let's think about those innovative startups building AI writing tools. You see a lot of them.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
They might get rapid initial growth, lots of users signing up. But as more and more users start generating content articles, emails, whatever their per-prompt API costs can just explode. And that puts significant pressure on their finances, their stability, maybe even their viability.
Wow. Okay, what else?
Or think about large enterprise applications. Big companies using AI for tasks like summarizing really lengthy documents or maybe providing instant translations.
Okay.
During periods of high demand, maybe around quarterly reporting time or a big product launch, they could face these unexpected, potentially substantial spikes in their AI usage bills, costs they didn't fully anticipate.
Right, unpredictable spike.
Exactly. Even chatbot solutions, which seem like such a perfect fit for generative AI,
Definitely.
they can struggle to maintain healthy profit margins when they scale up to serve, say, a global customer base. Just because of the sheer volume of individual interactions, each one incurring a small API cost, it adds up fast globally.
So the very success, the very adoption of these AI integrations can ironically become a financial burden if these underlying costs aren't properly anticipated and managed.
That's the crux of it, yes.
Okay, so what can companies actually do? What practical steps can they take? Are there strategies to, mitigate these expenses, or are they just stuck?
No, they're not necessarily stuck. There are several potential solutions, different approaches people are trying. One option is to explore using locally hosted open source large language models.
Open source, like Llama, Mistral, those ones?
Exactly. Llama, Mistral.
Yeah.
There are quite a few good ones now. However, as our sources emphasize, this isn't like a magic bullet. It's not free either.
Right. What's the catch?
Well, It requires a pretty significant upfront investment in powerful computing infrastructure, servers, GPUs.
Expensive hardware.
Yes. And it also means you need to hire specialized engineering talent, people who know how to deploy, fine-tune, maintain, and operate these complex models effectively. That expertise isn't cheap or easy to find.
So it sounds like that might be trading one significant, the API fees, for another potentially significant cost hardware and specialized staff. Though maybe you get more control.
Potentially, yes. More control, perhaps predictable costs once set up, but a big initial hurdle.
Okay. What other options are there besides going fully open source?
Another promising strategy is to implement what are called hybrid architectures.
Hybrid. Mix and match.
Yeah, basically. This involves being strategic. You reserve the more powerful, and therefore more expensive, API calls like from GPT-4 maybe for only premium features or really critical tasks where you need the absolute best quality.
Okay.
And then for more routine, less demanding interactions, you use simpler, less costly models, maybe smaller open source ones, or even older, cheaper API tiers.
Smart. Use the right tool for the job, cost-wise.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Also, implementing robust caching mechanisms is really important.
Caching, like saving results.
Exactly. Intelligently reusing the outputs from AI models whenever possible. If you've asked the same question before or generated similar content, maybe you don't need to call the expensive API again. Minimize redundant calls.
That makes sense. Reduces consumption.
It can make a big difference. And finally, some companies might have to consider introducing, say, user quotas or even usage-based billing models for their own customers.
Pass the cost on.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Transferring at least a portion of the AI API costs directly to their end users, depending on how much they use the AI features.
Those all sound like sensible, proactive approaches. It really highlights that integrating generative AI isn't just about the initial buzz, the tech excitement.
Not at all.
It requires really careful financial planning, and it sounds like ongoing management, active management of these costs.
Exactly. And this leads us neatly into the broader implications, really. The long-term financial viability, the sustainability of heavily relying on these external AI APIs. It's absolutely critical for the sustained success of any business trying to innovate with AI.
Right.
We almost need to start thinking about AI usage differently, not just as a cool feature added to an app.
But more like infrastructure.
Yes. Exactly, as a fundamental infrastructure cost, much like we account for data storage or cloud computing power or network bandwidth, it's becoming that foundational. So understanding and diligently planning for these ongoing expenses is, well, it's no longer optional, is it? It's an absolute necessity for building something lasting.
So ignoring these often hidden costs isn't just like a minor budgeting oopsie. It could actually jeopardize the long-term success of otherwise really promising AI solutions.
Precisely. What might seem like a revolutionary leap forward today could, ultimately become a significant financial liability, a real burden down the line, if these fundamental cost considerations aren't carefully addressed right from the beginning.
Wow. This has been a really illuminating deep dive. Definitely shed light on a perhaps less talked about aspect of generative AI's incredible potential.
Oh, so.
The key takeaway here seems clear. While the capabilities are truly transformative, amazing stuff, we absolutely must not overlook the very real and often recurring costs associated with using these APIs. For you, the listener, whether you're involved in evaluating AI tools for your business or maybe just encountering them more in your daily digital life, having an understanding of this financial dimension, this cost aspect, it's absolutely crucial for getting a well-rounded perspective. It's not just magic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this brings us to a final thought, something for you to mull over.
Okay.
As generative AI becomes even more deeply woven into the fabric of our digital lives, and it seems like how will businesses and even individuals navigate this? How do we balance the incredible benefits these powerful tools offer with the sometimes substantial ongoing costs of actually accessing them?
That's a big question.
It is.
Yeah.
And what innovative new economic models might we see emerge to try and address this evolving dynamic? How will the value be captured and paid for? Something to think about.